Let me guess. Unknown caller? You could reduce the number of unwanted calls and emails with online privacy protection. The latest innovation from Discover will help regularly remove your personal info, like your name and address, from 10 popular people search websites that could sell your data. And we'll do it for free. Activate in the Discover app. See terms and learn more at discover.com/online privacy protection.
This episode is brought to you by Paycor, the HR and payroll software made for leaders. It's never been harder to recruit, hire, and engage workers. That's why HR leaders and frontline managers depend on Paycor for all things people management, from onboarding and performance reviews to compensation and benefits. Learn more at paycor.com/leaders.
I'm Nick Westergaard, and this is On Brand, helping you tell your story. My guest this week is Patrick Holly.
Any brand is just as strong as the people who work on it, right? The old way that we used to work and build brands was kind of broken. The old way of coming into work, spending 9 to 5 there, sitting at a desk next to people and all that kind of stuff isn't necessarily the only way that you have to do things. You know, you can end up finding the best talent in the world by literally finding them around the world.
Patrick Holly is a multidisciplinary creative whose career has run the gamut from agencies like RGA, AKQA, to brands like Apple and Uber, to building a content platform with Steph Curry. He currently serves as Upwork's executive creative director, leading a team of writers, art directors, designers, and strategists who are changing the way the world thinks about work. Prior to joining Upwork, Patrick was brand director at Harley Davidson, overseeing content, PR, social, and brand partnerships. When Patrick is not working, he spends most of his time on two wheels or watching Sex and the City reruns with his wife and dogs in Austin, Texas. Patrick, welcome to On Brand.
Thank you so much, Nick. Glad to be here.
I am delighted to chat. You know, there were a lot of great brands mentioned in your bio, but I've got to be honest that I've always been fascinated by the Harley Davidson brand, because that's my go-to example for building a brand that people feel connected enough to that they will tattoo the logo on their bodies. So I have to get your quick take on your time connected to this classic American brand.
It's a completely wild kind of concept, right? That someone would take a logo, something that a brand uses to put on their product, and they put it on their body. But as someone like myself, who, I mean, I'm looking at a portrait of a Harley Davidson in my office as we speak. I love the product. I love the bikes. I've had so many of them. I spent so much time with them, and I gotta say, I get it. You know, I get it when people are like, I love this brand, because they've just kind of been effortlessly cool for so long. And it's kind of like they got a bit lucky and they got a bit smart when they did it, you know. They have kind of had this great reflection of their brand in culture throughout many periods of time. And every single time they've just been like, hell yeah, let's get on board with that, you know? And so I think they've just been smart about it, and thus have got a pretty good brand behind them because of it. But working there was pretty magical. I actually got introduced to the person who ended up hiring me there through a podcast. So, you know, I tend to like podcasts now.
There you go. We'll take it. Well,
Yeah.
I love that you said effortlessly cool, and we talked to all kinds of brands here on the show with different challenges. That's certainly a unique one, because you can probably count them on just a hand or two, the brands out there that are effortlessly cool.
Yeah.
So what's it like when that is when that's your 9 to 5 to help the effortlessly cool brand?
It's very stressful.
Yeah. How are you going to mess this up?
Yeah, I know. And the thing that I just kind of like tried to embody when I was there was just think about your audience and do the things that they'll like, and they tend to think that you're cool because of it. One of the things that we ended up doing was, because I started there April 2020. So there was something going on there. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I'm pretty sure it was pretty important. But at that time, we're like, well, shit, we have, this audience that used to be going to all these motorcycle shows, and they happen to now all be canceled. And so what we ended up doing was thinking about like the people who, really do tattoo the logo on their bodies, and how can we, serve them? They're the people who are not only going to these motorcycle shows, but they're building bikes to go there. They're building bikes to go there, building bikes to sell at these things. And so we're like, how can we help these small builders to really kind of weather this storm of COVID in the best way we can? And so what we ended up doing was throwing our own motorcycle show on Instagram. And we called it the No Show. The tagline was "All show, no go," which we just loved, which is typically a derogatory term for someone who builds a beautiful bike but never rides it. So what we ended up doing was taking over our Instagram for a week, and every single day we would post a swath of new bikes, and these were videos that the builders, these kind of like individual garage builders, took of their bike, and they would take a photo of it, and they would walk you around the bike, and they'd be like, this is my 1979 Shovelhead. I did this, and this to it, and it's really great, and all that kind of stuff, and people were able to kind of interact with these people in a way that they typically wouldn't. Typically these builders would bring their bike to a show, and maybe a couple thousand people see it over a season, and now they had a couple million people seeing it. And so not only were they able to kind of like connect with these people through social media, they were able to end up connecting with customers, because that's really what they do. When they go to these shows, they build these bikes to show and to sell. And so they ended up doing that. And then we, as a brand, continued thinking like, okay, how are we going to support them even more? And so what we ended up doing is, no motorcycle show is complete without merch. And so we actually ended up selling merch for the No Show and giving all of that money to the builders as well. So we ended up being able to, help them out with, a way to peddle their wares and get out there. But then also we're able to cut a check to each of them individually as well. So I think when it comes to like being effortlessly cool, it helps to start by having a brand that's been that for 100 years, I will admit. But it also helps to just do things that are for the people who love your brand already, or for the people who you want to love your brand, and like earnestly do something for them. Because it's pretty hard to fake that, and people can sniff it out from a mile away. But conversely, if you do something like earnest and meaningful and really for them, they also notice that immediately too. And so I think it's doing those kind of actions for a very long time tends to be the effortlessly cool formula for what I found.
Awesome. I'm going to attempt what may be a smooth segue or a clumsy segue.
Let's go.
Because that's such an important lesson. And I feel like there's a lot of these that, following March, April of 2020 to now, this window of time, a lot of lessons learned, and that obviously dovetails into your work with Upwork. But before leaving Harley Davidson, what kind of lessons? I mean, obviously, it's people are so eager to get back in person, but was there additional digital connection, or I feel like every brand is looking at what we can keep, what we can learn, and what we need to go back to.
So when we think about the past few years and what's kind of been, and let me just repeat your question so I make sure that I'm not answering a completely other one and rambling.
I think it was the clumsy segue. So
no, not at all. So basically, like over the past few years since COVID, how have we, what have we learned to kind of do when it comes to connecting digitally that we might not have before?
Yeah. You talk about like everything going online, everything being virtual, even a motorcycle show. And now that we're back, I think we're deciding what's the important stuff to go back to and what were efficiencies from that window of time that might continue to make sense or still need to be a part of the brand.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah. I I'm going to start not just with the brand, but with the people who actually build that brand. What I learned through the pandemic was really how to build a team that never has met each other, or at least at first has never met each other. Because I think that any brand is just as strong as the people who work on it, right? And so when it comes to what I personally, but also brands across the world have learned over the past few years, is that the old way that we used to work and build brands was kind of broken. And we hadn't really rethought it in over 100 years when we used to like drive horses to work and stuff. So I think like for me and for hopefully a lot of other people too, the old way of coming into work, spending 9 to 5 there, sitting at a desk next to people and all that kind of stuff, isn't necessarily the only way that you have to do things. You can end up finding the best talent in the world by literally finding them around the world. But making sure that, we are keeping the things that used to work in the office, in our minds as well, which is actual connection to physical connection, meaningful connection, intentional connection between people. And actually, I was just giving a talk about this yesterday, that, we can't think that now that we have this kind of ability or kind of permission structure to be remote, that we can just stop thinking about the people that we work with as people and just as workers instead. And so I think that like it was really fantastic over the past few years, brands and people running them realize that they can build a team of people who span the globe. But also simultaneously, they need to realize that if they're going to do that, they need to be very intentional about the way that they connect those people and share kind of the humanity of their team over space and time.
On Brand, we'll be right back after this.
In the metaverse, doctors will practice surgeries hundreds of times before operating on real patients. The metaverse may be virtual, but the impact will be real. Learn more at meta.com/metaverseimpact.
How can you change the world, build a company, or establish an industry if no one knows you exist? Marketing makes you exist. The Space Marketing Podcast is where we explore marketing principles, strategies, and tactics through the lens of space. Join me, Izzy House, as we talk with industry professionals about their challenges and successes with marketing in the new space economy. Subscribe at spacemarketingpodcast.com or look for the Space Marketing Podcast wherever you listen.
Now, back to the show. So you've set up a much smoother segue than I attempted earlier, because talking about the teams that do the work, that build the brands, and you're at Upwork. Talk a bit first about what's the Upwork elevator pitch for anyone listening that may not know.
Oh, for sure. Okay, so Upwork is the world's work marketplace where people who are looking for work and people who are looking to hire people find each other. And we index on remote and freelance talent, and we're trying to kind of share that with the world, because frankly, I don't think I'm alone in thinking that the old way of working was broken, and it's kind of now dead.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to kind of lead people into this new world where, frankly, it's pretty great.
Well, and what I am really excited about with this conversation is kind of the two angles on it, because you yourself, and obviously what we've been talking about as leading a team of brand builders and doing that creative work, and now at Upwork, both building that brand, which in turn is a brand that helps to build teams like this. So, you were. I saw that you gave a talk on the Hollywood model for building creative teams at scale. I wonder if you could, give us a little more on what that intriguing talk title delivered.
uh, Absolutely. So actually, I just finished up the second part of that this week at Adobe Max. But um, uh, the Hollywood model is something that has been happening in, would you guess it, Hollywood, for a long time, and hence the name. And the model was basically where studios would bring on, the best writers, the best creatives, whatever, bring them all into a room for a fixed amount of time to make something. In their case, movies, TV shows, things like that. And they didn't just find people who were in Hollywood; they found people who were around the world, and they brought them together. And they staffed up based on needs. They staffed up based on opportunity. And the idea behind that is that it works, And so when you think about building your own team, why just let Hollywood have all the fun?
I think that is so key. That's another thing that, like you said before, is feels like it might be broken about the old model of having this kind of set team, as opposed to, Hollywood is a much better metaphor. I always like to think about it like as like a heist team, or
yes, I love
some
that.
sort of commando unit, because for this one we need a driver and we need a safe guy. See, that makes brand building sound like some sort of criminal enterprise. So the Hollywood model is probably much more aspirational for listeners.
Well, it also sounds pretty badass too, Nick. So I might have to change the Hollywood model to like the Heat model or something like that.
Right? Yeah. You need Ocean's 11. You need someone that's the acrobat that can get into the room or whatever. But
yeah.
So you've also, speaking of all of this work, you've been working on a rebrand at Upwork as well, which kind of dovetails with what you were talking about earlier in terms of the way we build brands is different today. So how did you approach this rebrand? What made now the time for doing this?
I think there was just a lot of love for what we as a brand are looking to do, not only internally, but just within the world right now. There's never been a time that I've actually personally ever worked at a brand that has been more relevant to the way that the world is currently, existing and talking about and things like that. The way that we work, like I said before, has never really been up for debate until now, save about 100 years ago. And so, there's kind of like a cultural kind of reason for that. There's also a reason that, when a new, very talented CMO comes in, the first thing they do is think, is this brand doing what they should be doing? And we had a new, very talented CMO come in Melissa Waters, who's our current CMO and my boss. And she saw us going through a bunch of work and doing all this kind of stuff. And she was like, hey, let's pause. Let's think, like, is there a way for us to kind of like add a little bit of fuel to the fire to what we're doing? Because, as marketers, as branders, as advertising folk, our job is to help people stand out. And so we ended up doing a long and very rewarding strategic exercise to that end, to think about, what's everyone else doing right now, not only in the world, but really kind of in our space. And how can we stand out from it? And how can we do so in a way that feels very honest to what we want to see in the world? And so that led us to, this is how we work now. which is our new brand campaign and our new rallying cry. And honestly, one of the coolest things that I've ever made in my entire career.
And that's from the guy from Harley Davidson. So
Yeah.
so take that. But I also love that you mentioned. So I always feel like there's kind of an X factor with when something works, and I like that you called it a rallying cry, because I do feel like there's something that captures the energy of when building a brand, and you end up almost building a movement as well. It really seems like it has a potential to connect and resonate with folks in a different way. Was that by design?
Absolutely. I mean, we were actually when we were looking even at the design of the campaign, the visual design. Some of the inspiration was pulled from protest posters, and there is very much a movement happening right now within workers and people who are driving work, and that's a movement that we haven't seen in a long time, and so we wanted to not only hitch our wagon to it, but stand at the front, carrying sparklers and doing somersaults. So we really wanted to make sure that when we go into this, as we, meaning that the collective, we workers and people who hire, go into this new way of working, that we had as a brand something to say about it, because we definitely have a product that we believe has something you can do about it. So This Is How We Work Now was meant to be, that rallying cry. It's, there's no question mark at the end. It's a very declarative statement. And it speaks not only to the moment, but it speaks to the moment, every moment at which it's said in. So I could say this is how we work now, right now, and it would be relevant to the world that we are living in right now. I could also say this is how we work now in 50 years, and it will be relevant to that moment as well. And so it's really kind of us committing to being a kind of champion of change for the better, forever.
Well, now is a great word. You can't. It captures that. And jokes aside, you mentioned there's not a question mark at the end of it, and I think that's not to be underrated either, especially with something like work, because I think we have a lot of questions, and there's kind of this, we alluded to it earlier, this kind of out of the wilderness feeling at this time that we find ourselves in. And I think declaring that for people to rally around and generating excitement is important. You talk about the difference in how brands are built, and the different tools that one uses to do that. But in looking at this rallying cry of how we work today, how we work now, what tools are key in bringing that rallying cry to life?
For our brand, or in practice for people?
As part of the brand campaign, yeah.
Perfect. I should have figured, because of the name of this podcast.
Well, I mean, it's an honest question. Again, I think that's why this is a fascinating conversation, but has created confusion of which angle we're talking about when.
So in terms of bringing that to life for our brand, helping people understand not only what the statement of "This Is How We Work Now" means, but how it relates to them, comes down to making work that people love, or in some cases people hate, but gets them really thinking. And so we kind of didn't pull any punches with the communication and the creative that came out of this. And we will continue on that path over the next foreseeable future. We ended up starting out with a a zombie-led musical that let people know that the old ways of work are dead. I mean, who better to tell you that they're dead than a dead guy? But and then carrying that through to really, really well-written copy really boldly designed work to get people to not only pay attention, but because it's like being shoved in their face, but pay attention because it's actually well-made, creative, and it's entertaining, and it's fun, and it's thought-provoking. And so it's just kind of like carrying that craft across the board, and starting with a very strong strategy and a very strong kind of rallying cry, and then just pushing it to its absolute limit, and making sure that anyone who sees it can't help but have an opinion.
Oh, I love it. And earlier when you said all of our jobs as advertisers and marketers is to stand out, and as you said that, I thought, that's almost as hard these days as as effortlessly cool. And it takes zombie musicals. People are so bombarded with information. I think that's a great example too
Yeah.
of the big swings that we have to take to stand out, but also one, like you said, that is very connected with what you're doing, and the message about the old ways being dead. Well, speaking of effortlessly cool, my high school basketball playing son would chase me away from my microphone if I didn't ask about creating a content platform with Steph Curry, who's one of his heroes. So give me the quick snapshot of that work.
Okay, yes. So it is an extremely long story, but I will give you the 30-second version, or the closest to that I can. So I was working at AKQA helping build a content platform for the Jordan brand. I ended up taking a motorcycle ride with this guy who was a friend of a friend. And I believe it was June 2016. And we were in the middle of nowhere after riding through Yosemite. And he was like, "Hey, I got to stop. I gotta go to find a bar or a restaurant or something like that." And I was like, okay, cool, man, whatever you need. And we ended up finding this tiny little bar that had a TV, and he like sprints into it to watch the NBA finals. And he is like super into it. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I like basketball too, man, but like you're like really into this. And it turns out that he was actually working with Steph to build a content platform for the Chinese market. Because I don't know if you know this, your son probably does if he's a huge basketball fan, but the Chinese market and China in general has more people who play basketball on a weekly basis than exist in the United States. So it's a massive audience for basketball, and Steph is the biggest guy out there, or at least he was when I was there. And so I ended up working with this guy and some other guys that were working alongside Steph and his team for a few years to help figure out how we can create like a pay-gated monetized content platform with Steph out there. And it was amazing. It was like complete uncharted territory every single day.
Yeah.
And it was incredibly fun. And it actually led me to do a little bit of work with Giannis Antetokounmpo as well. I actually photographed him, and the photograph I took of Giannis is how I met my wife. So
you've got all sorts of stories, from jobs, from podcasts, and photos to meeting your wife. So yeah, if the other lesson here is to just, who knows where your photographs and podcasts will take you. So lean into them.
Just say yes to everything.
Exactly. Well, and now with that fun fact from China, I will see if my son knows it. And if not, you've made me, or as close as I can get to effortlessly cool. So we'll see though. To a teenage son, the dad is rarely anything remotely close to cool.
Godspeed.
Yeah. Well, Patrick, I've had a lot of smiles during our conversations, but as we wrap up, it is time for me to ask you for a brand that has made you smile recently.
Absolutely. I'm going to pick a local Austin brand here, which is where I reside. Tito's. They did something recently that is just like chef's kiss. And I think the strategy behind it was basically that every single vodka brand and brand in general has a seltzer, and everyone was asking Tito's, why did they have a seltzer? And so they did a very, very funny a little social and kind of like organic-ish campaign where they sold just a can. And they're like, you can mix Tito's and soda in this can if you'd like, but we're never going to make seltzer. And I was just, this is amazing. And I was talking to the creatives who worked on that, because I was just like, I need to connect with these people. And it was just, so simple, but has that nice bit of a reverence that if you look at the work that Upwork has made, I tend to like. So a bold move from a brand, and one that definitely has got me talking about them.
Well, that is a great example. And also, gosh, that's a on target smile, because I like the brand strategy there, because obviously there's some benefit in what others are doing, but that's a great example of what if you did the opposite?
Yes.
And standing out by zigging where others are zagging. So that is awesome. Patrick, where can folks go to learn more about who you are and what you do?
The best place to get me is on LinkedIn. My Instagram is just photos of my dog, so you're not going to learn more there. My dog's very cute, though. But you can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me at Patrick Holly at Upwork.com if you feel like you want to get a little bit longer form with me. But LinkedIn's usually the best thing for me.
Awesome. Well, we will link up to that in our show notes, which folks can find at onbrandpodcast.com. Patrick, thanks for being on brand with us.
Thanks, Nick. Had a great time.
On Brand is part of the Marketing Podcast Network. If you like what you're hearing, if we've made you smile, you can always listen free on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or whatever your favorite platform may be. And please take a moment and rate and review the podcast to help others find the show. Until next week, I'm Nick Westergaard, and I'll see you on the internet.
This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.